So, another day, another distro, another review. So, Manjaro. Now, what's the first thing you think of when you hear Manjaro? And no, please don't mention in the past when Manjaro's security certificates expired, right? Or the issues in the past where they had with the treasury, right? I know. Well, we all know Manjaro's had an interesting past, but this review and chat about it is about the technology behind it. Not interested in the issues with the community, etc., etc. I'm just literally not. So, what is Manjaro? Manjaro is a Linux distro that uses Pacman and has access to the AUR. Manjaro's majority of its packages comes from the Arch repo, but it's important to realize Manjaro is not Arch. If you run Manjaro as if it is normal Arch, meaning you go and get tons of packages from the AUR, you get certain software, you do all of that, you're going to break it. Okay? Don't try and tweak Manjaro to be Arch. Okay? Manjaro has stable, testing, and unstable. Basically, unstable is basically the equivalent to Arch stable. Testing is in between, and stable is theoretically packages that come out 2 weeks later. So what we're going to do today is look at the latest Manjaro. On my own workstation at the moment, I'm actually using it, and I'm using the GNOME version, but we're going to take a look at XFCE. So I'm just going to give it 5 gigs of memory, because why not? Some extra storage space, and let's create the virtual machine. So we doesn't really matter whether we use open source or proprietary drivers there. So one thing, of course, important to realize with Manjaro, Manjaro has been around for many years, many years, and is really considered a new user-friendlier distro. If you want to get your machine installed quickly, and if you use possibly a lot of Flatpak packages or snap packages, and you use minimal AUR, maybe 1 or 2 apps if it's needed, and you use mostly of what's in the Manjaro repository, it will serve you well. They do have additional tools. You can use a newer kernel. I really wouldn't recommend it. I would just keep with the standard kernel that comes with it, CC and LTS kernel, and unless your hardware needs it, it's pretty much going to be more reliable that way. Anyway, so let's launch this installer. Wooha! So, not too worried about the location. Gonna erase a disk. Gonna give it a swap to file. You have ext4. You have FXS. Different file systems. I'm just gonna use the standard ext4. What's my name? Gosh, of course. Gonna type in a very strong password. And use the same password for administrator, aka root account. Hit install and go install. Now, of course, Manjaro uses Calamares installer, and they were the distro that actually invented the Calamari installer, which a lot of other distros, of course, use to this day. Must be honest, I was actually going through the Manjaro forums earlier, and I must admit, I know they're getting a little bit of criticism at the moment for the delay of moving KDE 5.25 into testing. However, after myself having used it in previous distros, I kind of do see their logic why they're taking a bit longer. And as the Manjaro team has stated, their users do have the opportunity to use testing if they want a bit more cutting edge. So I like Manjaro if I want to get my machines up and running relatively quickly and I need some access to 1 or 2 items from the AUR. What I find with my workstation's graphics card especially I have an Optimus machine, which means I have an Intel on board and I have NVIDIA, and I like to be able to switch between the two. And I often find on my hardware, the Arch-based distros tend to work a bit better. So if I'm busy going through a Flatpak phase at the moment, so at the moment I'm not using too much AUR, and Manjaro has been pretty stable for me because I've run it this way. In the past, I used to get all my software from the AUR. I used to use the newer kernel than what Manjaro recommended, and it was a mess. I mean, I'm the first person to admit that if you try to work too much out the box with Manjaro, you're going to break it. If you want to rather work more out of the box and you want it to be a Pac-Man based distro or closer to Arch, then go use something like Endeavour, or go use maybe even Garuda or Arca or Zero Linux Mint. But this is Manjaro, I suppose, is kind of like the Linux Mint of the Arch world, where Linux Mint isn't quite Ubuntu, but it's similar. Manjaro isn't quite Arch, but it's similar. So yeah, almost done with the post install configurations. So just going to let that continue. So by default, Manjaro comes in 3 flavors. They KDE, XFCE, and GNOME or GNOME. And what is nice though is that the consistency of the theming is the same across all of the distros. Now, as you know, I'm the first person to say, hey, you can theme any distro, you can make it look however you want, and it's true. I must admit, from a polish point of view and consistency and a whole general branding, I really think Manjaro's actually really stepped up to the plate in recent years. I think it just makes their product seem even more decent, in all honesty. Might not be a big thing to many people, but I actually appreciate the time that they've taken there. I do see the post install is taking a couple more moments to complete, so let's give that a few more seconds. One of the avenues where Manjaro really does shine quite well is when it comes to proprietary drivers and detecting them. So Manjaro has the Manjaro hardware detection utility, which is very similar to the drivers detector or installer in the Ubuntu distros, where it can pretty much detect it, and it's a one-click button, and there you go, and it's installed. Other distros now, of course, also use it. Garuda based theirs on Manjaro's. I saw that after looking at the forums and the forums communication quite a while ago. So, really great tool. Personally, I would love to have access to that tool in a normal Arch based distro. Okay, so that's installed. Let's give it a restart. And let's boot quickly. Let's go over here. And we'll fix the resolution and do all that jazz now. Just let Manjaro start up. Okay, so the name is, of course, Gosh. Bit of a better resolution there. Let's just fix this. Go to Settings, Settings Manager, Display. That's, of course, where you go on a XFCE distro. And let's close that there. So, of course, Manjaro gives you documentation, mailing list, project, how to get involved, donate, applications. If you click immediately on applications, it gives you a semi-standard suite of apps you can choose. So you would literally click it and then click on the tick and update the system. I tried it earlier. I did a whole bunch of them at once and it didn't work. It only installed like the last three I selected, which I'm not too sure why, so I'm going to skip that. But what I'm going to show you is some of Manjaro's own interesting tools. So I want to find Manjaro Settings Manager. Here we go. So this is where it's the hardware configuration that I mentioned earlier. So you'll click on the hardware config, and here it's automatically installed it. But for example, my machine with my hardware, it shows me my NVIDIA drivers, gives me the option between, of course, open source or proprietary, and I just hit the button and it automatically installs it. Great little feature there. And of course, here's a kernel feature, which a lot of distros are doing now. So basically what this does, by default, Manjaro recommends the LTS kernels. And LTS kernels are genuinely a good idea if you're using additional proprietary blobs that need to be, or binaries that need to be rebuilt in the kernel. So if, something like VMware, VirtualBox, some Broadcom wireless drivers, NVIDIA drivers as well, you can use DKMS, which will rebuild these drivers. But unless you have newer hardware, there's specific features you really need, sticking with the LTS is probably actually a good idea. You should have less issues when it comes to updating those bits of software I mentioned. But of course, you can go and select one of the newer ones, hit install, reboot, and the machine should come back up again. And some drivers might have to be rebuilt or reinstalled. User accounts, simple user account setting there. Language packs, right, pretty great. Nothing all much there to show you. Keyboard settings, no, pretty much the actual norm. I just also want to find this Manjaro has Toolbox, I believe it's called. Okay, I don't think they have it on XFCE version, but essentially what this does, it allows you to go and do additional changes via using the CLI for that. Okay, so of course they've included a 130-page beginner's guide. Really great for new users. Goes through everything on how to install it alongside, how to get some additional info from their forums. Would really be nice if more distros included such a thing as well. And then of course, by default they use only Office. You can change that yourself. Go put in only Office if you need to. Comes with Steam, and of course to add or remove software it uses PAMAC, which is their utility, right? And if you were to go to the three dots and you were to go to preferences, so let me just type in my credentials, it will show you advanced options and third party. So if you take a look at the third party, you can enable AUR, which is disabled by default. Flatpak, Snap. I've tested this myself and works fine with snaps, Flatpaks, and AUR. No issues from the installer, and it's able to update them right away using that. And of course, you can see here's that little options here. So it's a little updater, so it gives you notifications of should you check for only notify for LTS kernels, all kernels, unsupported kernels, all missing language packs, so all pretty built in there. And then, from, the rest, normal standard installs, Firefox, Steam. This game's audacious for those that enjoy playing music. And menu editors, notifiers, normal hello, Pulse, audio, task manager. Not really too much else to show you, to be honest. Used just a gig of memory, which isn't bad. And of course, we know which kernel. So yeah, would I recommend it? I would recommend Manjaro if you know your use case. If you are going to tinker around and use a lot of software from the AUR, don't go near Manjaro. Go use something like Endeavour or normal Arch, please. Otherwise, you're going to break Manjaro and have its headaches. If you're going to work within the confines, maybe Flatpaks or only software from their repositories, and you're not going to play around with kernels, your system should be pretty stable and you shouldn't have issues. So I think Manjaro's come a long way in a couple of years. They've managed to weather a lot of storms. I know the community is extremely divided when it comes to Manjaro. But hey, you know what? Manjaro exists, and I think if you are fair, it's all in all pretty decent. If you use Manjaro, dislike Manjaro, have comments, would be great to leave your comments down below. And as always, thanks for watching.